Oh, man. Well, kind of feels like the world is ending again. And, things are rough when the end of the world just starts to get boring after a while. In any case, the numbers across the county are pretty abysmal. And I wouldn't be surprised if we end up going completely virtual for a little while. So what I'm going to start doing, I said this for the English 1010 class as well. I'm going to start uploading the YouTube lectures to both the face-to-face classes and the online classes. And honestly, this is something that I'm kind of glad I can do to kind of sort of like introduce it before it becomes necessary. And it kind of helps me see whether or not the YouTube classes stand up with what's going on in the face-to-face classes. Because just because you guys are online, I definitely want to try to give you an experience that is similar to the face-to-face, right? That's actually something that's kind of important to me. So being able to kind of sort of like run these classes together is, I'm kind of glad I can at least try to do that. Otherwise, I really want to try to universalize what we're doing so that everybody has at least a sort of similar experience in the class. Now, something else really important we need to talk about: how dope is my shirt? Right. This is a Roosevelt's, and this is Macho Man Randy Savage with the I think it was WWF title at the time, staring reflectively into the distance, his deep thoughts. This is every time I record videos on YouTube, I try to wear a Roosevelt shirt. I've got a collection of them I like to show off. My wife is always expanding. I never bought one for myself. All of these shirts are provided by my lovely wife. I can't get enough of them. They're amazing. In any case, so I'll always do a little bit of a comment about my shirt in the beginning, just so that you know what's going on, right? Like explain what's happening there. In any case, let's jump in with our first assignment. Now, I'm taking it in a little bit different a direction for 1101 this semester because I got really bored with the way that I've been doing it. And I'm like, I got to do something a little bit different. So you guys know that you have a portfolio that you're going to be working on. We're going to be doing a lot of writing. Going to be checking up on how things are developing as we go along. We're going to try to do lots of revisions and lots of reimaginings of the writing as we go along. So the first thing we're going to write about, and this is a concept that I have been in love with for a long time, is jumping the shark. Now, jumping the shark, in order to do this well, I got to give you a really good understanding of what jumping the shark is. So this video is going to be primarily directed towards the definition of jumping the shark and basically laying out some examples of it so that we can kind of start identifying our own experiences with the concept. Now, jumping the shark is a phenomenon that was first noticed in sitcom television, right? This is a very TV oriented idea. And the funny thing about this is I used to use this concept to be all hip and cool back in the day, but TV has kind of gone the way of the dodo bird in the way that we used to understand it. And as streaming has taken its place, the conversation has changed a little bit, but I think overall we can still get the basic idea. Jumping the shark first came about with the TV show Happy Days. Now, I'm sure most of you out there probably don't know what Happy Days was. Happy Days was a show in the 70s. It was really quirky, a lot of, basic, comedy show. For some weird reason, the only thing I could think about is it reminds me of that 70s show that came out later, except Happy Days was a lot more like family friendly. But in any case, Happy Days was extremely popular, and this is the show that gave us the pop culture icon, the Fonz, right? Hey, now the Fonz as a character has kind of persisted. Like you guys have probably heard of Arthur Fonzarelli, right? He's like that titular cool guy. Now, the show for the most part was a typical sitcom. It didn't have a lot of craziness. It was, pretty ordinary plots, a lot of quirky characters and situations. Now, there was an episode of Happy Days, and I also can't really stress this show was pretty popular. People watched it. It was a hit in its day, right? But there was an episode of Happy Days where the setting was completely changed. And this episode took place largely at a beach. And TV shows still have a tendency to do this type of thing, right? They change location. Now, this particular episode wasn't anything to write home about, but at the very end of the episode, for some weird reason, and I can't remember why this occurred, but there's this absolutely bizarre sequence where the Fonz is water skiing. And everybody's watching him water ski like it's a contest or something. And he goes up a ramp and flies through the air. And as he's flying through the air, a shark tries to bite him, right? Arthur Fonzarelli ski jumps over a shark. He jumps the shark. Now, people who were watching Happy Days back then saw this episode, and it was just really bizarre. It was just one of those strange things that you see it and you're like, why did they do that? Now, after this happened, most people say that Happy Days went downhill after this. The quality of the episodes deteriorated, and it started waning in popularity really, really quickly. So the idea came that was what kind of doomed the show, the jump the shark moment, right? Now, here's where things kind of get interesting. Jumping the shark as a term actually can be applied to a lot of different things. It is the moment that something broke the media. It can break the TV show. It can break the movie. It can break a book series. It can break all sorts of things, not just relegated to TV shows. But this happens a great deal in TV shows because the way TV is produced, and one of the things I'm really interested in with this semester is talking a great deal about media. I have this interesting theory that if you want to teach students writing, you have to kind of come to them where they are. You guys, and I would even say older students, not just the high school things that I'm teaching now. I love my high school students. Okay, I'm not being too derogatory here, but they're just completely different animals. Like it's just like I have a really hard time bridging the gap between us. But most people's personalities, most people's framework of the world is somehow rooted in the media that they consume, and this is often like a pop culture thing. Jumping the shark is extremely normal in a TV show because TV shows are written in an episodic fashion, right? We create it as we go along. Sometimes a television show can respond to what the fans are saying. Sometimes a TV show tries out new things because the plot lines are becoming stale, right? And that staleness causes the writers of the show to try different things to bring the audience back, right? Now, these can work, or sometimes they can backfire in a lot of really interesting and different ways. Now, there's actually a website I'm thinking of linking to this video underneath it. I'm not sure if it's even still there. I'll look. But it was called jumptheshark.com. And it had all these different ways that a TV show can jump the shark. And all of these things can be applied in a lot of different ways, right? So one of the most common ways that a TV show can jump the shark is if it does something just absolutely ridiculous that kind of breaks the logic of the show, right? There's some really interesting classic examples of this. I'm going to do a really old one first. There was an old show called Dallas. Now, Dallas had this plot line called with a character who was JR. And JR was one of the main bad guys of the show. And at one point, he got shot. Now, I know all my young people out there are like, I know, but just bear with me for a minute. JR got shot. And for a huge portion of a season, everybody was like, who shot JR? Right? It was a big plot point. And then the payoff to this was that JR had never been shot at all. It was a dream. For a show like Dallas, which is a pretty typical kind of soap opera type thing, this was a very, very unexpected shift in the type of stuff that the show did in its storytelling. They had never done dream stuff before. And it was like all this buildup because they're all like water cooler talk around this time when the show was running was everybody's theories of who shot JR. And then there was absolutely no payoff for it. So for a lot of people, Dallas's jump the shark moment was this kind of reality breaking thing that the show did. Another example I can think of right now, again, so much of my media is so unbelievably lodged in what is old. And that's because I'm old. I'm 37. Now, I know there are probably people out there who are older than 37, but I'm at that weird part of my life where I'm starting to realize how I don't feel young anymore, right? I used to, even like a few years ago, I still felt like a young man. Like I pulled a muscle the other day and I was like, oh, this is different than when I used to pull a muscle than when I was young. I'm starting to feel it, right? So, but in any case, another example of this is a little bit more recent was Desperate Housewives. Oh dear God. I never watched Desperate Housewives. My wife did. And when this happened, I remember being very interested in what the plot was doing at this point. So Desperate Housewives has this moment where the entire neighborhood like burns down, right? And not only does the entire neighborhood burn down and the characters and the setting is completely uprooted, it also jumps 5 years into the future. That's a huge shift, right? So much of Desperate Housewives was rooted in the community that they were living in. So to actually introduce such a drastic change in how the show is depicted, like threw a lot of people. So that's an example of a shark jump moment. Is after that, the show just kind of started trending off the rails. Another really common example of this is when two characters who have romantic tension finally get together. Now, it's funny. This one happens a lot. It's especially bad if one of the show's main appeals is the tension between these two people. A lot of people, and this is a word that we're going to come back to, a lot of people argue that The Office jumped the shark when Jim and Pam got together. And one of the fun, you can actually kind of attack this from multiple different directions. The Office, after Jim and Pam do finally get together, the plot lines and the characters grow increasingly more wacky and extreme because it's almost like one of their primary vehicles for storytelling is gone, right? That's a sign that your show has done something that has undone itself. Frasier, oh God, again, so dated. Frasier did this too with the characters of Niles and Daphne, but I'm sure you guys can probably think of an example of a TV show where two characters get together and it just kind of sort of trashes the plot from there on out because so much of that tension, the show relied so much on that tension, and without it, they're just kind of going in circles, right? Here's another few examples. I'm actually running a lot longer than I thought I would. This is a fun topic to talk about. The death of a character. Now, this can actually come in two different directions. If a character is killed off, or if an actual actor or actress passes away and that affects the storyline. Trying to think of some examples of this. Golly, again, there was a show, I think it was like 9 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter. The actor John Ritter passed, and the show did this whole thing. Like, they did not try to cover it up. They did not try to recast him. They actually wrote his death into the storyline. And from there, I think the character was kind of not replaced, but they brought in David Spade to kind of function as that kind of male character. I think this is the nature of these live streams. It's very possible for me to get stuff wrong. Deal with it. But in any case, even though that moment was handled extremely well, it was something that viewers never could quite get past because the show was just so unbelievably hobbled after that. It was like the expectations of the show were just very changed after that moment. You know, this also can do for recasting. I don't know if you guys ever watched Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but there was a recasting for the character Aunt Vivian, and that just really threw stuff off. I need to watch more current shows. I feel like something like this happened in Supernatural? No. Like, oh God, I can't believe how out of touch I am with recent stuff. All my references are stuff that's old, but recasting someone so where they're a different person playing the role can do this as well. Let me think of a few other examples, and I'm going to tie this with something I want you to do in the discussion board. I had all these examples in my head, and now they're all gone. Oh, golly. In any case, these are just some of the examples of when a show jumped the shark. But the point I want to make here is jumping the shark is a useful concept to talk about here at the beginning, because it gives us an opportunity to actually engage a little bit with argumentation. Now, and this is probably what I'll talk a little bit about next time. Argumentation is what we call a mode of discourse, a mode of writing that you can actually kind of explore on its own. A jump the shark moment is essentially an argument that you are making about a piece of media. You are saying this is the moment that the media went downhill. This is the moment that it stopped being good. But immediately somebody can come around and say, I don't agree. It wasn't that moment. It was this moment. Let me give you an example. Going back to The Office, Jim and Pam get together, and a lot of people argue that that's the jump the shark moment for the show. But there's another one. Michael Scott, the boss, who was, in my opinion, really the focal point of the show up to that point. The show really was about Michael. Michael leaves, right? He leaves to go with his love interest, and they move away. At that point, the show goes through this whole thing where they try out different bosses, and eventually Andy Bernard becomes the new boss and thus becomes the new focal point of the show. That is fundamental shark jumping right there. That is such a just huge viable candidate for what occurred. Now, probably the absolute best example, I'm going to leave off with this. The best example of shark jumping I've ever seen in my life, though, was in the show Family Matters. And that was the one that had Steve Urkel. That show not only had a character written off with no explanation, they actually had a kid on the show disappear. And she disappeared without any explanation as to what happened to the character. And do you know why they got rid of her? She didn't test well with audiences. So the Winslows, the central family of the show, went from talking about their 3 kids to talking about their 2 kids. It's like, what the hell happened to Judy? One episode in season 3, Judy goes up the stairs and she never comes back down again. It's actually really bizarre. But also, there was this interesting issue that the show was originally supposed to be a realistic depiction of a Chicago family struggling with family issues, right? And that was where the comedy was supposed to come from. It was called Family Matters. It was supposed to be more of a middle, even lower class depiction of the type of stuff you saw on The Cosby Show. But the entire purpose of the show was completely destroyed in the first episode because they introduced the character Steve Urkel. Steve Urkel was such a popular character with the test audiences that they completely rewrote the focus of the show to go from a standard family sitcom drama to the Steve Urkel nerd show. And what was supposed to be a realistic depiction of family struggles and comedic situations became Steve Urkel building robots, traveling through time, and changing himself into a more suave nerd called Stefan Urkel. We completely destroyed the concept of the show in the very first episode. It's absolutely fascinating how that happened. Now, I'm going to leave you with a couple of questions. When did Harry Potter jump the shark? When did Star Wars jump the shark? When did Game of Thrones jump the shark? Now, these are all newer ones, and I'm hoping that you see these and you get some ideas. But you could also take this in some very personal directions. When did you jump the shark? I feel like I jumped the shark when I graduated college because my whole life has just been one confusing misadventure after another after that, right? When did your favorite band jump the shark? Power Man 5000 was one of my favorite bands in the 90s. And they had this weird spaceman costume, sci-fi, death metal rock. and then they completely threw it all out. Two of the band members left, and they became this weird punk rock outfit, and they completely changed everything about themselves. There's the shark. We're jumping over it, right? When did your city jump the shark? Was it when the lake caught fire? Which is something that actually happened up north in New Jersey. I think a lake was so polluted that the lake caught on fire. That is, man, that's I can't even wrap my head around that. The point is, shark jumping can apply to almost anything at all that you think was a moment of decay or a moment where things started to fall apart. Now, this is what your first paper is going to do. This is what it's going to explore. But for now, what I want you to do is I'm going to start a new discussion forum. And in that discussion forum, we're going to call it the Jump the Shark assignment. And I want you to go into that new forum, and I want you to give me 3 potential examples of shark jump moments. Now, this is not a question of being right or wrong. This is a question of justifying your choice, right? So let's just keep it at around, 7 to 8 sentences for this one. We don't have to get too crazy in the first week. We are still testing a lot of the equipment and a lot of the software to make sure everybody understands it and to make sure that we all can get on and participate. So that's all I want you to do for this week. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit more about like the writing mechanics. And we're going to start talking about, some more of the more nuanced stuff. And I'll give you some more ideas, and we'll talk about shark jumping more. Because, I'm sorry, it's a fun topic. I really, really like this topic. But in any case, if for some weird reason the YouTube videos are not working for you, or, for any problems that you're having, please contact me, okay? Because I want to try to make this as accessible and easy as I can. And if anybody's having problems, I want to fix it, right? I want to make this experience good for you, and I want to make sure that we all get something out of this. So please don't be afraid to contact me if you're having issues. Next week, we'll have our first live session. I'll give you a date and a time for that. Remember, it's really more of a bonus point type thing. So if you can't make it, don't panic. It's just a way for us to get on and chat. I've sent out the link for the teams. That should be a chat room that you always have access to, and I will check that every weekday. So if somebody's got questions on there, I'll try to come in and answer it. And you guys feel free to go in and have conversations in there if you want. We are going to have some group stuff. So that could be a good place to conduct that if you need to. On that note, I think I'm done. We're keeping it simple this week. Just go into that new discussion forum. Tell me a little bit about your jump the shark moments and why you think they are jump the shark moments. And I appreciate you guys. Hope things are going well. Have a good rest of your day.